Welcome to all of you for the continuation of our wonderful classes about the illusory energy of Maya. And we have more in store for you today. And today is exciting because today we have a new internet service which we're testing out, which I tested yesterday and it terribly failed. But it did work to upload videos. And also today, it's also your lucky day, we have a new keyboard, which we get to test out, although it's not connected properly to my mixer, but we'll do a little kirtan. I have my voice back, which is, it's nice to have. So we're going to see how this internet works. Faster internet, I have a higher resolution camera, and it also, this is my right hand, it's not backwards, so that higher resolution camera was not working well with the former internet. So we got a newer internet that just was available a few days ago, and so let's see what happens. It failed yesterday in class for some reason. Okay, so I had sold all my other keyboards, and I had a mission to get a new keyboard, which was to produce music very quickly and efficiently. And so it's been sitting around the office and I haven't had time, and I just opened it up. The box last night. So here we are. I don't know how you can hear it because I don't have it connected to the mixer. But I'm sure you can hear something. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Radha Marhaba Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Jishoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jishoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Janna Ballabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Janna Ballabha Girivara Dhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Radhamar Hava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. So we brought it up to a new level, Hare Krishna, and you will, with the facility of this keyboard, I will be able to create songs very quickly that might even sound like major productions, but I won't get any Grammys for them, but songs of kirtan and other bhajans, and also, as you know, I like to do songs in English. Songs which will, songs which will hopefully make us more Krishna conscious, and may even get inspired in the middle of class to sing a song like we used to do before. So, here we are, everyone. Just move this a little bit. I was engaged yesterday in a discussion, which was a little, slightly awkward, maybe a little bit taboo, but nevertheless necessary to discuss. And it was an aspect of the center point of Maya. And we haven't really discussed this. And the topic also came up this morning in something I was reading and commenting on. And I thought there's no question of talking about Maya without talking about the central point of Maya and how we deal with that. So that is the issue of sexuality, because it's one of the most important issues, because it's the most important to transcend, and it is also the easiest to capture us. So that's what we're going to go with that today. We'll see how far we get and see where it goes, but I think it's extremely important. And I want to begin with a statement that this is a difficult topic. And the reason it's difficult is because it's such a paradox for us, in that it's something which is so important to control. But the physical need and the physical desire is so strong. So it's one of the strongest paradoxes that we face. It empowers us when we control ourselves. But the need, the sexual need, the sexual desire is rooted fundamentally in the false ego, identification with the body. And so the psychological, emotional, and physical need is intense. So we're caught in this paradox, and we need to understand how to deal with it in a way that's real, and at the same time in a way that allows us to purify ourselves and transcend it. And if we don't understand how to deal with it, we'll either artificially renounce it and later get entrapped by it, or become entrapped by it right off the bat, or commit to a higher standard presently than we're able to follow, being maybe unrealistic, or maybe not in touch with what we need, and so forth. So, one devotee was discussing with me a problem, and I think his problem is universal, or it's fairly pervasive. And it's a problem that disturbs him because nobody talks about it, and it's almost like you can't really talk about it because there's only one answer. But the problem is, the one answer that there only is doesn't always work for everybody. And that's why it makes it problematic to talk about it, because in talking about it, you start getting on the borders of being heretical or oppositodontic. Because our philosophy is that the senses should be controlled, all of them, as far as possible, and only engaged in Krishna service and not in sense gratification. So that also applies, of course, to all the senses, including the sexual desire. And so our standard is that sex is allowed only when one is married, officially married, and only for the purpose of having children, which is historically not so revolutionary, but now it seems revolutionary. And why do I say historically it's not revolutionary? Well, if you look at the history of marriage, it was not a big romantic institution. It was more of an institution for stability, for maintaining your life, or maintaining a community, or maintaining a kingdom. And it has transformed into something much different. And it is transformed into a very sensual affair in which people are trying to satisfy their sensual needs, their emotional needs, their sexual needs, their intellectual needs. Like every need in the book is you're supposed to satisfy it through a relationship with the opposite sex, or a sexual relationship, sexual union. And so what's happening now, it's very common now in the world, is that a couple gets married, and after some time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, one of the partners tells the couple, I don't love you anymore. And it was, a wonderful 20 years, and I'm ready to move on into another relationship or another aspect of my life. And of course, the partner on the receiving end is totally devastated, and just feels like they've been used as an object of love, or a sensual object. But why it's like that is because people are entering a relationship based on fulfilling physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, like every possible need. You're going to be my God. And at a certain point, hormonally, the stimulus is not there. A lot of what we call love, which is it's amazing discussion, and you can read about it if you want. But a lot of what is translated as love is a hormonal chemical reaction. It's not actually what we would consider dedicated service. That when we talk about love, we talk about responsible, dedicated service to a partner. That's you could say a Krishna conscious definition of love and marriage, or one of the definitions. But what it's come to be now is very much, as you know, based on a physical attraction, and that is hormonally connected. And so when we see that person, touch, smell that person, talk, hear their voice, and so forth, it stimulates a certain hormonal response which intoxicates us with this feeling we call love. But the problem is later in life, that's not going to remain, because as you get older, the physical stimulus and all those stimuluses, they alter. They can grow deeper in other ways. But physically, the stimulus is strongest when you're youngest. And so this is quite common. So what we're seeing now in the world today is that most people will be married 2 or 3 times. They'll just go to this point and say, I don't love you anymore. I married you to stimulate my senses, to stimulate my life. I'm not being stimulated. And the neighbor's wife is stimulating me a lot more, or the girl at the office, or the girl I met at the pub, or whatever. There's we say the fire or the spark. The spark is coming from another person. And what is that spark? Again, it's chemicals, hormones being translated into a feeling we call love. And that's why Prabhupada said there's no love, because that's not love. We can say there's love between husband and wife when there's dedication, when there's compassion, when there's duty, and so forth. But we can't really say love exists if there's a sexual stimulus. That's not love. That's just mutual gratification. So, and Prabhupada says this, and the Bhagavatam says this, that people will marry because of physical and sexual attraction, and that's the only reason they'll marry. So we're seeing that it's, Kali Yuga is kicking in. We're seeing it. Kali Yuga is doing quite well, especially in the last 5, 10, 15 years. It's really, upgraded itself to 5-star status. And it'll keep upgrading, Kali Yuga on 5G is going to keep going, right? So this is one symptom of Kali Yuga on 5G. The relationships are based on sexual desires, satisfying one another. Now, the irony of it is that a Krishna conscious marriage, why do we get married? For a woman, the needs and desires are different than for a man, and Prabhupada says generally all women should be married. It's the best position for them. And men can get married if they feel it's good for them, and they don't need to if they don't want to. It's not absolutely necessary. They can function more independently than women. Women are a little more, of course, nowadays women are different, but just as a general principle, I still see that most women prefer to be married. So do most men, but there are, of course, many men that want to remain single, or at least think about it for part of their life. And that's okay. But Prabhupada said the women should be married. That would be the best thing. And so the purpose of a Krishna conscious marriage is not sex, and it's not sense gratification, and it's not the fulfillment of every damn desire you throw on your partner to fulfill. That is a huge illusion. Excuse my French, or it was English actually. This is dandelion tea. Have any of you ever had dandelion tea? Dandelion's a flower, but when you make a tea, it has a bit of a flavor of coffee. Interesting. So, I see one of the problems in sexual control is just the conception of marriage, because whatever someone was unable to control themselves sexually, which is most of us young ones, Prabhupada would say, well, then get married. Marriage was the solution. But the problem that many people found, especially men, is that not necessarily the solution. It often became what's the word? Your nemesis. By getting married, you became more disturbed. But understandably, now this young man is alone in an apartment with a beautiful young woman. But still, the point is, when you enter a relationship with the purpose of advancing in Krishna consciousness, with the purpose of controlling, purifying, transcending that desire, it's a lot different than when you enter the relationship with the idea that I'm going to fulfill that desire. Now you may say, but didn't Prabhupada say you get married because you can't control your sex desire, or that's one of the reasons you marry, and by fulfilling it, you purify it or overcome it? And that's true, but the use of the word fulfilling it as Prabhupada's using it, and the common usage is different. And Prabhupada's saying you fulfill it through having sex for procreation, regulated sex, and your basic life is sadhana. You didn't get married to fulfill to enjoy. No, you could say you did to fulfill that desire, but I would say better use the word purify. And you didn't get married to enjoy sex. That is the first problem. We don't get married to enjoy sex. We actually get married to purify ourselves of the desire to enjoy sex. So that's the first illusion. No, I need to get married because I need to enjoy sex. No. You need to get married because you need to purify your desire to enjoy sex. In the process of purifying that desire, it is required to engage in the act of sex. Otherwise, how will you purify it? Otherwise, you wouldn't need to be married. So you get it out of your system, so to speak. But then we have a problem. Having sex only for procreation, which could be 2 times in your life, doesn't seem to get it out of the system. And that's a problem. And that's what we need to talk about. And, okay, so once we enter marriage with the right consciousness, what it's for spiritual advancement, then everything's going to be easier. And stage 2, what is the goal? Well, there are many goals in Krishna consciousness, but in the process of becoming Krishna conscious, one of the goals is to control yourself. The way I can't sit over here because the keyboard's in the way, but then you don't see Prabhupada. Okay, let's see if I can pull this off so you can see Prabhupada's picture. So, marriage, if we establish first, whatever you're trying to do anything, you have to establish the standard. And you don't want to change the standard. You don't want to make it up. So we don't want to say, well, yeah, but, Prabhupada said this. Yeah, well, but. Yeah, I have to write that down. A new mantra. I made 13 videos yesterday. Aren't you proud of me? And as you remember, I would often in class say, that's a good point. I'm going to write that down. And I have papers and papers of things I wrote down. And can you imagine? I'm writing them down for weeks. And can you imagine when I pick up the paper and read what I wrote down, I sit there and think, yeah, well, but what does that mean? This is like I wrote it down 3 weeks ago. I have no idea. About 25% of what I wrote down, I have no idea what it means. So I have to explain it to myself, right? And then I had a practical plan that I actually, after the class is over, if I have a realization and an idea that I want to put on a video, I should just go in because it's fresh in my mind. I was having a hard time yesterday remembering all the little things I wrote down. Like, why? So, so I think some of you may have been through this experience of yeah, well, but, and it also comes with the statement, Prabhu, you have to be real, which I don't want to undermine that statement because it's true, but sometimes that statement backfires. We have to be real, but at the same time, we have to start from the principle of what is the standard. You can't compromise the standard. You can say, I can't follow that standard now, but you can't change the standard. So that's where it starts. So what is the goal of Grihastha life? To enjoy sex? No. To have so much sex that you get sick of it? No. The goal of Grihastha life is to become Krishna conscious. And one of the regulative principles is no illicit sex. So that's one of the goals of Grihastha life. We have to start there. That's where I want to get to. Because if I don't get there, how will I ever get out of the material world? That's our whole philosophy. The sexual desire is the cause of entanglement, right? But it's a natural desire. I have to deal with it. I can't run away from it. So you have to deal with the paradox, but you have to start with a standard. Okay, the standard is that I want to be perfectly pure. So then the next question is, what's the quickest way to get there? And the answer is going to be different for different people. It's not one answer for everybody. What's the quickest way? Well, for the brahmachari, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. For the grihastha, it's going to take longer. It's a more zigzag path. So if you can take the straight line and you can do it and you can achieve get to your destination, fine. Why zigzag? You don't need to. But if you're going to take the straight line and fall on your face and you can zigzag your way to the goal, then that's what you do. But the goal is still the same. The goal doesn't change. So that has to be understood. Now, the next question is, how do I get to the goal? And here's where it gets tricky. And the reason it gets tricky is because we haven't been given many options to get to the goal. Basically, we've been given 2. Either remain single and celibate, or get married and have sex only for procreation, which might mean you have sex once or twice or 3 times or 4 times in your marriage, and you work the next 25 years to pay for your sex because now you have 4 kids and it's not cheap. Okay, sorry to be blunt, but it's true. Sex is expensive. Which is why prostitution is so popular, because you can do it without the kids and the expenses. But isn't prostitution expensive? Not as expensive as getting married. So, okay, we're being funny here, but it's true. Raising a family is expensive. It's a lot of work. I don't mean to minimize it. And part of the process of becoming purified is that you raise children. So now we have the problem where the devotee says, yeah, well, but. Yeah, I know that's what we should do, but I wasn't raised that way. I was doing A, B, and C when I was young, and now trying to be perfectly 50 rounder only, it doesn't work for me. So, or it's difficult, or I want it to work for me, but I'm challenged, or I won't even try because I know I can't do it. So you get something in that range. Or not yet. I'm not ready yet. I'm working on it. I hope to be ready. How do you deal with it? Well, one of the simple solutions, and this should be obvious, but a lot of times it's not because we can't see our future that well. One of the big problems is initiation. Because even though you should follow the 4 principles, if you don't, or sometimes you slip and you're not initiated, then you haven't committed to your spiritual master, and you haven't committed totally to yourself. So you're still being somewhat of an upright individual because you're not breaking a vow. Or maybe, you're breaking a little, you're breaking it to yourself because you want to do it. But it's a big thing to vow to someone else, especially spiritual master, especially the deities. And then naturally there's going to be guilt when you break that. And so the easy and simple answer for this dilemma, yeah, but 50 rounds, but, yeah, but, well, all right, well, then just don't get initiated until you know you can follow. Then you don't have to even go there in your head. You just go, okay, I was raised this way and that way, and it's so hard, and I don't know if in marriage I can maintain it perfectly, etc., etc. Fine. Then think about whether or not you want to get initiated, because you'll have to deal with the reality that ultimately you made a vow for 50 rounds. Okay, broader definitions are there, but strictly speaking, you did make a vow to only do it for procreation. And if you don't, you have to live with that reality. So do you want to live with that reality? You might say, well, that connection with my guru is so powerful. I need it to help me, and I'm almost there, and I'm trying. That is something you will have to work out in your head. But I'm just going to go down. This is not moving naturally, so I can't see if you have any questions. Yeah, okay, now we're going to, yeah, so there is a question. All right, but, so now this is where it becomes difficult for many devotees. I know the value of celibacy. I've practiced it. A lot of people who are dealing with these issues are people who lived in temples who practiced it for years. I know. But right now, I just don't see myself doing it, and I don't see myself being a 50-rounder. I actually feel a need for intimacy, sexual intimacy. What do I do now? Well, Prabhu, there's plenty of bridges you could jump off. No, I'm only kidding. Although you might feel like that. But this is a reality. So how are we going to deal with that? And as you know, and as I've said, nobody talks about it. It's just like, okay, Prabhu, here's your beads. Be a 50-rounder, and let's have some pakoras. And that's about it. And there's a few classes and some shlokas in Bhagavatam about the entanglement of the material world and how the physical body is not really that beautiful. It's just blood and mucus and air and bile and like that. And it gets old. And the kids cost a lot. And, that should be enough, right? Just, you hear that and you should be fine now. Just be completely sexually controlled the rest of your life. Well, not exactly. I wish it were that easy. So what do? Number one is, if you're trying to sort this out, it needs to be discussed with mature devotees who can guide you to understand how you're going to move forward in the best way, and help you understand any misconceptions you may have about sex and Krishna consciousness and Grihastha life. And then devise a plan which is individual. So the point is, we're all not perfect. We're all not Brahmins. And one of the problems we've faced in ISKCON is like we're trying to create a homogeneous culture where everybody's a Brahmin and everyone's the same. And then devotees, they like the idea of being sattvic and Brahminical, but it's not always easy for everyone to do that. So the individual devotee has to consider, according to their nature, what they can do and what they can't do. Again, keeping in mind, the goal is always the same for all of us. But how much I can do now, how much I will be able to do later, when I'll be able to do it, what are my needs, what are the needs of my spouse. I have to know my own needs because I don't want to marry someone who doesn't have those needs or who has needs that I can't fulfill or don't want to fulfill. And then in discussion with senior devotees, you determine what will be best for me in my specific situation to become sexually pure. And so sometimes it is said, you may have to take one step back to take two steps forward. So sometimes it may look like you're going back in order to recoup and get your strength to go forward. That does happen. Oh, that's what brahmachari life, and then you get married, and some people think, oh, he just stepped down, he went back. But he's just recouping so he can go forward. He's going in a new direction. Not necessarily back, but there's that saying, one step back, two steps forward. So sometimes there's a compromise that has to be made in order to fulfill a need which cannot be fulfilled by advancement in Krishna consciousness, but it has to be fulfilled by engaging that need. So that's the point where we need guidance and discussion. As I said, it's not normally spoken about. And everyone's need and everyone's plan is not going to be the same. But the goal is the same. So you're discussing with someone you respect. Okay, this is my situation. This is my need. This is what I'm able to do at this point. This is what I cannot do. How do I process that in a way that I can fulfill my need for relationship, my sexual need, at the same time remain renounced, advanced, and progressing towards the goal so I don't get sidetracked? That is the question you have to ask. And when that answer is understood, then you practice that. And as I said, it's going to be different for different people. And some of what you practice may be substandard because that's the reality of where you're at. And if that's the reality of where you're at, that's the reality of where you're at. But the principle is you take the best solution and you try your best. And you do what is best in the present situation to make advancement. So you have this situation which is, I think, we can equate it to eating, especially eating sweets. Many of us, when we finish our meal, if we don't eat a sweet, we'll go kill somebody or drive our car up into a wall or something. We'll go crazy or get angry or don't want to talk to people. Whether it's a psychological need, a physiological need to have a sweet, it's an addiction, whatever, that's another discussion. But you know what I'm saying, right? So I say, okay, Prabhu, or Mataji, I have a sweet. It's an amazing sweet. One of the best sweets you've ever taken. And so you eat the sweet and you say, it's true, that sweet is amazing. I can't believe it. You are amazing. That sweet is amazing. So we got air conditioning in here, remember? Now the heat's on. It's fall. It got cold last night. He does heating and cooling, so we're good. So you're eating the sweet, and I say, are you satisfied? And you say, wow, that sweet is amazing. And normally you just eat one sweet after you eat lunch and you're satisfied. And then you say, can I have another sweet? So what just happened? Now you're going over the point where you're satisfied and you're eating a sweet you don't need. It's no longer helpful. So that first sweet was good because it fulfilled the need to have a sweet. But the problem was, it was so good, it inspired you to eat the second sweet, which is what you don't need, which is not healthy, which is going to put you to sleep, and it symbolizes excessive, unnecessary sense gratification, which is not helpful. So sense gratification, up to a certain point, is helpful. Beyond a certain point, it's not. Just as eating a certain amount, if you don't eat enough, you remain hungry. If you don't get your sweet, you go kill somebody. But if you eat too much, too many sweets, it's not healthy. You become foggy in your brain. You become tired. So that's the idea. So what a sincere devotee is trying to do is actually, he's not really trying to satisfy his senses. He's trying to become Krishna conscious, and he's trying to figure out how to be Krishna conscious. And part of the way he has to figure out how to be Krishna conscious is to figure out how to satisfy his senses, not because he wants to satisfy his senses, because if he doesn't satisfy them, they will take him away from Krishna, which is a different way, a different motive, a different reason to satisfy the senses. It's not just, I need this, I want this. It's more like, I recognize I need it and I wish I didn't, but because I do, I have to satisfy it so that I can be peaceful and engage in my service. Not that I have to satisfy it to satisfy me for the sake of satisfying me, but to satisfy that desire that's driving me crazy to have a sweet, and once I eat it, then I'm fine. So it's a different approach, and so that's how we approach it. And so even if we're engaged in quote-unquote sense gratification, we're only engaging in it in order to eventually satisfy that need so we don't need it anymore, not just to do it for the sake of gratification. So if in understanding your particular needs, whether they're sexual or other needs, that is all these things we've discussed about, is the paradigm, is the base by which you make judgment, then you'll be in a healthy position, and then gradually you will be able to employ those desires and conditioning in a way that helps you gradually become purified and eventually renounced to the point where you don't need it. Now, we recognize we are products of Kali Yuga, and Kali Yuga is sex crazed, basically. It is, in the last 50, 60 years, it's just become insane. There was, when I was very, very young, there was this sense of chastity and sexual sobriety and modesty. That was thrown out the window in the name of enjoyment. But the problem is now it's like an addiction. So people are now becoming devotees who've been sexualized, growing up. And whether we like it or not, it's a reality we have to deal with. It's sometimes embarrassing how we are, how we've been conditioned, but it's a reality. And so if you deal with it in a real way, face it, understand how to purify it, you'll be successful. Now, the last thing I will say, and I want to take some questions, is we have many, many grihastas. Grihastas, not Ridananda Maharaj said it's not grihasta, it's grihasta. It's a short R-I, gra, like rishi. It's not the rishis, it's the rishis. And it's not the grihastas, it's the grahastas. There's an R with a dot under it in the transliteration is a short I. Ra. Not re, ra. That's your Sanskrit lesson for today, students. Don't say you didn't learn anything today. So, we have many amazing grihastas who are pure devotees, who are perfectly following the regulative principles. Many of whom, some of whom perfectly did it from the very beginning. Many of whom had some trouble, slipped and fell, got up again, brushed themselves off. But over time, were able to do it. So some people have an easier time, some people have not such an easy time, and some people have a difficult time. But the point is, if you continue in the process with the understanding the goal and knowing how to apply yourself to get there, then eventually you'll be successful. That's the point. Now, I want to do a little discussion of physiology or biology, because I think it'll help us understand this. The age for procreation, it's at least according to Vedic times, Prabhupada generally said the woman should get married as a teenager and the man like 25, and the man should be 8 or 10 years older than the woman. So that's it's neither here or there necessarily as any kind of absolute, but just for the sake of discussion, not that we're going to tell women when you're 13 get married or 16. But for the sake of discussion, Prabhupada's saying the early years in your life, that's the childbearing years. And at a certain point, the woman can't bear children anymore. If you notice, which you all have, the body's quite beautiful when it's young. And I'm sure sometimes you've gone to your friend's house and they've had pictures of their mother and father when they got married. And you know their mother and father like 20 years later, like when they're 50 years old. And you look at these pictures and you think, oh my God, your mother was so beautiful, which is not a compliment. It's actually, don't say it, because the connotation is she's not beautiful anymore. Or, you know, if you're a little older, like my age, you've seen movie stars and rock stars and so forth grow old and ugly, some of them, unless they had plastic surgery. It's just, it's the nature of the body. I mean, devotees are a little different because they don't smoke, drink, and so forth, and they think better. And I think devotees tend to be more beautiful. But still, you know what I'm saying, that when the body's young, it's very beautiful. It's very attractive. But it gets to a certain age, it's not so attractive. Hormonally, things change. And it corresponds with those childbearing years. If you notice the body of a woman, if she's Hollywood and makes, $15 million on a movie, she can afford to look like she's 35 when she's 75. She can pull that off somehow or other. But and some people have good genes. But most people, when they get 40, 50, that youthful beauty, it's not there anymore. When they get 60, not everyone's as beautiful as I am, as you know. And I'm 70. My mother was also like that. She looked much younger than she was. So as devotees, we have some Shakti, maybe. But not everyone's so fortunate that they stay youthful and beautiful. But definitely when they're younger, most people, that's whether you're beautiful or not, that's the time you're most beautiful and you're most sexually appealing. But when you get older, it's just an unfortunate reality. It's like, when I was young, I was so attractive. Now look at me. It's like, it's depressing, right? But it's a reality. But one could ask, why does Krishna do that? Why does the body deteriorate in a way that certain hormones and so forth start to diminish or increase so that your skin sags, you get wrinkles, things don't look good anymore. You get flat tire, as the Prabhupada said, flat tire. You get a flat tire here. Your skin sags, and so forth. You become overweight and so forth. Well, when you're no longer in your years of procreation, you don't need a stimulus, a sexual stimulus. So the body just naturally It kind of, it's not so sexually appealing. Sorry to say, ladies, but, it's a fact. You know it. We all know it. It's a sad truth. Although there are many sexually appealing people, they try to do that. But in traditional societies, people don't try to make themselves sexy when they're 50, 60, 70, like we do in our society. And, the 70-year-old woman dresses like she's 25 and shows her stuff. That is a modern phenomenon because we're so such a sexually crazed society. So I will get to your questions. I just have to make this point. So the body not only naturally is not so sexually appealing when it gets older, but the sexual desire physiologically, it decreases. And one devotee doctor said, after women have children, it decreases. And the girls are saying, it doesn't seem like it decreases for the men. That's another story, but it decreases relatively. And still, because we live in a sexually crazed society, there's all this stimulus. But naturally, the body, the intensity of the desire, it decreases. Otherwise, why would you have Viagra and other sexual stimulants? Because the body's not producing it. It doesn't need to. They're older. It's not, they're 50, 60 years old. Their wife's 50. They're not having kids. They don't need it. So nature, by nature's course, the sexual desire, it decreases. The physical attraction decreases because the body gets older. So if you stay in Krishna consciousness and you think, I could never overcome this desire, nature, it'll overcome it for you, even if you chant bad japa. Just don't fight nature, and have 10, plastic surgeries, so you can, so when you're 70, you can catch the 25-year-old girls, As long as you don't do that, you'll be okay. So if you let nature take its course, it will do that. And, now we have this, phenomena, 50, 60, 70-year-old guys are looking for girls 20, 30 years younger than them. Whereas if you tell the 70-year-old guy, well, just, marry a girl your age, he'll look at all of them and say, why would I want to marry them? That's the whole point. So you can renounce, so you can be controlled. That's, hold on, I want to close that window. You may have heard me joke about Viagra, because Viagra is a drug which helps stimulate sexual desire, especially for people who, for whatever reason, drinking, smoking, unhealthy lifestyle, excessive sex, have lost their sexual desire. So Viagra came out, I don't know when it came out, and I don't know in your country what they call it, but I first became aware of it when I was doing a show, and there was a band on stage, and there was a song called La Bamba, and it went something like La Bamba, and they made a joke out of it, and they changed La Bamba to Viagra. Viagra, So it was like, what is this Viagra? What are they talking about? And then I came to understand it, and I was thinking, my dear sir, you are so fortunate you've lost your sex desire. You are insane that you want to get it back. This is like the desire of every brahmachari. You've reached the goal. Like, this is what every brahmachari wants. Like, I have no sexual desire. It's finished. I'm over. I'm, 60, 70. It's gone. I don't have to worry about it. Now I can be peaceful. Now I can think of Krishna. And you're trying to stimulate it. You are absolutely crazy. So that's where society's going. It's diehard sexual stimulation. And so, but if you let nature take its own course, you live a pure life, have a pure mind, naturally, the physical body is not attractive. As long as you don't try to marry someone 30 years younger than you, if there is any attraction for a relationship when you're 60, 70, and you marry someone that age, probably good chance it's relational, not sexual, if you have to do that and remarry. But you understand my point. So nature will, if you allow nature to take its course and you allow your Krishna conscious progress to take its course simultaneously, you'll get to that point where you're older and you'll look back and go, yeah, when I was young, that was such a strong desire. I was so stupid and passionate. But I dealt with it properly. I got married. We had children. And I dealt with it. The last thing I want to say, which was in addition to the last thing I wanted to say, which you know that I'm authorized to say many last things because the spiritual realm is unlimited, so you can go on last, basically eternally. But a couple of years ago, I gave a talk in Lithuania about Grihastha life, which, if you haven't heard it, is quite useful. And I will summarize one of the points I made. Is that, you know, this whole idea of contraception. We can have sex without paying a price for it. But from the perspective of the Vedas and the perspective that Prabhupada wants us to engage our sexual propensity, he wants us to have children because having children, of course, will bring in and raise so many Krishna conscious children. But for us also, it's purifying because then sex comes with a price. And that's purifying when it comes with a price. Whereas if you get sex free, how do you get purified? So I just meet a girl meets me. No, don't use me. That's a bad. Boy meets girl meets boy. I'm like, yeah, let's have sex. Let's enjoy it. Sure, why not? And then, you know, they never see one another, or they see one another next week. There's no responsibility, contraception, no question of being married, and so forth. How will they get purified of their sexual desire if they don't take responsibility for it? Whereas if you say, I will only have sex when we're married, we will only have sex to have children, or even if I can't maintain the only 50, I don't use contraception. So if we have children, of course, no abortion. We will pay the price for having sex by having children. And I had a friend, he had 4 or 5. He couldn't control himself. I think most were accidents. And he said, I can't afford to have any more, so I have to be celibate. So that sounds funny, but he was dead serious. So when you raise a family and you raise children, it's very hard work. It's very rewarding, but it's difficult. And it's purifying. And that's one of the ways we become purified, because then we put sex in connection with what it actually creates, and that's the legal way to do it. Whereas when you do it illegally, then how are you going to become free from it? Because you're not really paying for it. You just do it, and you don't pay for it, and you don't become purified. You become spoiled. You know, the rich spoiled kid. That's what I wanted to say, and that's what I did say. I think I said it, and that's what that lecture in Lithuania was, an elaboration on how Grihastha life, if done properly, will help. That one of the ways that it helps purify us sexually is because we do sex responsibly. And if we do it irresponsibly, just to enjoy it, then you're at this razor's edge where eating that one sweet could stimulate the second sweet, which could stimulate the third sweet, and pretty soon you're a mess. You're sick. You're eating too many sweets. Okay, that's what I wanted to say today. I've said it in 40 minutes, and now, okay, we're going to go take your comments. I have a strange feeling we're going to go overtime. Oh my God. Wouldn't you know it? If you want to create an interesting class and get a lot of comments, it's easy. What do? Just talk about sex. And I'm sure no one has fallen asleep in this class or been distracted. Okay. Jyotirmayi says, yesterday I pointed out exactly this. What is the real vow that we took in front of Krishna Guru Maharaj? Then there are adjustments, but please keep what is the real standard in mind. Yeah. As long as, you know, it's right there in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's such a beautiful statement Prabhupada makes. He said, sometimes you can't follow something, but as long as you're not adverse to the principle, that means someday you will be able to follow because you're going to try as best you can. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm saying being celibate is easy. I'm not saying that. Even for those who it's easy for, it's not easy. It's a physical desire that's very, very strong. But what I can say is the concept of celibacy is beautiful, even to those who have difficulty following it. And they want to follow it because they see the beauty of it. Sexual control, only have sex to have children, bring in an advanced soul, chant 50 rounds, meditate on bringing in a pure devotee who can help the world. That's beautiful. That's so much more beautiful than sense gratification. And after having done that, have the strength to control yourself as far as possible. Those are beautiful thoughts. Doing that is difficult, but it doesn't minimize the beauty of it. And so sometimes we're caught in both. I can't do this, and I want to do it because I'm weak, but that idea is beautiful. And therefore I'll be successful because eventually I'll be drawn into doing what I'm most attracted to. Even though the physical is pulling me away, it's not, if I keep trying, it's not going to pull me away forever. I'll get strength. I can do it. And Krishna will give intelligence. And never forget that Krishna will help you and guide you. So Marco says, sex is the highest pleasure in the material world. No illicit sex. It's a declaration of war to Maya in her aspect of material energy. It's so difficult to give up this idea of pleasure until one doesn't get a higher taste. And when I was thinking, Marco, when I was thinking about this class, I had another idea, and I think it's an important concept. Wow, what happened? Keyboard turned off. So depressed. How did that happen? I'll turn it back on. Oh, it probably goes off on its own. I'm feeling, this is a Yamaha, and the logo for the Yamaha? It's T-lock. Did you know that? It's like T-lock, a triangle of T-lock. One this way, one this way, one this way. Isn't that interesting? So sometimes Krishna consciousness is difficult. And I just wanted to share that when it's like you want to be a tightrope walker, right? That's kind of dangerous if there's no net to catch you. So you really have to work on it. You have to practice, and before you're going to risk your life, you got to be good at what you're doing. So Krishna consciousness is like that. You can't just take it up casually and think, okay, I'm going to succeed. You actually have to work on it. And a lot of times devotees say, oh, it's so hard. But I don't want to minimize the difficulty, but it's likely that they're not executing it well enough that they could be successful. So it's like if you're going to fight in a professional fight, you better be prepared. That fighter was so strong, he knocked me out in 3 seconds. Well, you weren't ready for it. If you prepared for it, you could have fought him. So it's, if you're going to fight Maya, don't complain when she knocks you out if you're not ready. So a lot of devotees enter the process and say it's so hard, so difficult, etc. But they didn't prepare themselves. So I just wanted to throw that out, that don't allow yourself to think like that, but prepare yourself. If you're going to do this and hope to be successful, you have to prepare yourself. And thanks for Marco. Marco's a man. Men generally have a more difficult time controlling the grosser physical desires and are not so attracted to the emotional intimacy, more attracted to the physical by constitution. Okay, Kishori says, thanks for talking about this openly and realistically, real life philosophy for real people. Okay, that will be the name for today's class. Real life philosophy for real people. I think one of the worst things is that since we joined the movement, we think that we should be pure devotees from the first day to the next, and we expect the same from others. Very good observation. Can you talk about the result of repressing yourself and your partner and blaming yourself and therefore judging others? I think there is a problem and cause of many broken marriages in ISKCON. Well, how it's understood and processed will probably differ with various individuals, but we could speak some general principle. What Kishore Mani is referring to, I will rephrase it a little bit because I know what happens. You enter ISKCON with high expectations and thinking, within 6 weeks I'll be beyond the three modes of nature. And you look at all the devotees and you think, oh my God, they're all pure devotees. Then after a while you realize the reality is that that they're not all pure devotees, and neither am I, and this is a slower process. And then you have to start adjusting, and sometimes it's hard to admit and accept because you had such high expectations. And then you start looking at your faults, and you look at a lot of faults you had before you were a devotee, and you expected they would be gone, and they're not. And so it requires adaptation based on accepting the reality. This is how it is. And I've talked about this many, many times. We talked about this in Mayapur. If we can't accept the reality, we can't move forward to solve whatever problems reality is causing us. So all I can say is that wherever I'm going to make a profound statement here, so you may want to write this down. Wherever you are at is wherever you are at. And I know that was profound. And it took me lifetimes to come to that realization. But that's the point that Kishore Mani's making, that wherever we're at, we're not admitting that we're at there. And then we're not, if you it's like I have a disease, but I deny it, so I'm not doing anything to cure it. So how can you do anything to cure your Krishna consciousness if you deny your where you're at and what you need, and therefore what you need? So that's the point. So it's just acknowledging that conditioning is deep, Maya is strong. I'm not as advanced as I want or I'd like to be, but I can be. I think that's the other side, Kishore. The other side is I can be. It just may take longer or a different path than I originally thought. But don't give up. But unless you got your foot firmly fixed when you're climbing the mountain, you can't take the next step. So just make sure it's firm and don't pretend you're farther on than you are, because then you'll slip. So I think that's what you were getting to. Krishna Karshani says, maybe I better not give initiation to young people before they get married. Since they get married, they won't be able to find out if they can or can't follow. Yeah. It's something I think that we have to, we don't have control because each individual guru is making the decision, but it's definitely something that you as a disciple can consider. A lot of times when I initiate devotees, I joke, but I'm serious. I'm saying, you really want to do this? And why do I say that? I say, well, there's two obstacles I can see. Number one, taking initiation means giving up independence. That means, in theory, you're supposed to do what I tell you to do, even if you don't like it. And of course, I'm not the kind of person that would force you, and neither was Prabhupada. But in theory, that's the principle. The guru says, I want you to do this. So in theory, you're obliged. So you want to do that? You want to give up that much independence? And number two, you can actually follow these principles your whole life. You sure? So I say it with jest, but I'm also serious. It is something that we have to consider. And then Krishna Karshani continues, sex in marriage, even if it is for pleasure, not procreation, is not considered to be sinful. Any sex which is not for procreation is considered sinful. As long as, it's not sinful unless you're using contraception, because then you're preventing a soul from taking birth. So if you're not presenting, or you want to say lesser of two evils, sex in marriage is not as bad as sex outside marriage, but sex in marriage is not as good as no sex in marriage. And sex in marriage without contraception is not as bad as sex in marriage with contraception. So say, well, I use contraception, but I only do it with my wife. Okay, congratulations. You're amazing. No, that's not. That's not where we want to go. It's like, oh, I can't control myself. I have to have sex. Okay. What else is new? But contraception is sinful because it's preventing a living entity from taking a body that they should have been taken because uh, the soul cannot get the body, or the soul will not go into the womb to get it. So, yeah. Now that I've made you all feel guilty and want to feel like killing yourself, um, we remember the principle that